Hi, I'm Bryan Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Today I'm here with CEO of Hubspot, Bryan Halligan. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Bryan, I usually ask my guests, how'd you get this job?
Well, I started this company called Hubspot. That's how I got the job. Yeah.
So tell us what Hubspot is.
Okay. The idea behind Hubspot is simple, actually. I used to be a VC. And as a VC, my job was to invest in startups, all kinds of startups. And I would ask the startups, I would ask the CEO, Bryan, you're CEO, what's your plan? How are you going to grow this little startup into being a big, big company?
Yeah.
And the CEOs all would say the same thing. You know, we have this playbook, and the playbook is we're going to buy a list and send lots of emails. We're going to hire sales reps. We're going to cold call. We're going to hire a PR agency. We're going to do some advertising. We're going to do the big trade show. And the more I looked at that playbook, the more I sort of discovered that, geez, the playbook's kind of broken. It doesn't work anymore. People are sick and tired of those plays. Humans are immune to those plays. They have caller ID to block the darn cold calls out and spam protection, and they have a DVR and Netflix. Nearly impossible to reach humans. Mm-hmm. And so it really started with a frustration with marketing and how I thought it was broken. Then what happens, my co-founder that I had from eventual co-founder from school, he started blogging, and I sort of watched the success of his blog and how he pulled people in from Google and social media sites, and I'm like, that's the way to market. Sort of those two things came together that we said we want to rethink marketing from doing outbound marketing to inbound marketing, and that's kind of the heart of HubSpot.
Let's unpack that a little bit. Help people understand what the difference between inbound and outbound marketing is.
The heart of most marketing is interrupting people. It's interrupting people with an email while they're at work, with a cold call on their phone, with an ad while they're watching their favorite TV show, an ad on the radio.
So
it's irritating.
Billboards.
Everything.
Print ads.
Yeah.
TV spots.
And what they're doing is essentially what's happened in sort of society is somebody builds up some traffic, whether it's a highway or it's a radio show or TV show, and you rent a little piece of their traffic.
Yeah.
And that's just working less and less well. People are getting, their tolerance for that interruption has gone down,
yeah, and
their ability to block it's gone way up.
And why do you think that is? Is it because we're desensitized? Is it because we're so busy? We don't care? What is it?
I think we're so busy, but I think there's new technology that helps you block it out. Like, let's take email. Spam protection was sort of one nail in the coffin, but the bigger nail in the coffin is Gmail now gives you the ability to sort of separate out all those one-to-many emails. That's another whopper nail. It's just going to get harder and harder. With phone calls, the first nail in the coffin was caller ID. The second nail in the coffin, I think what will happen with spam protection will happen with phone calls. So you'll be able to say mark as spam if someone calls you and it's spam, and there'll be a spam list, and that'll get harder. And I think the other nail, the last nail in the coffin was less and less people hate to talk on the phone. I hate to talk on the phone. I don't have a phone on my desk anymore. Most of the execs don't have a phone on their desks anymore. I just think technology's enabled us to block out irritating marketing in ever and ever more efficient ways.
So your solution is inbound marketing?
Yeah.
So what is that?
Sort of the opposite. Instead of trying to interrupt somebody while they're doing their work, how do you pull them in? How do you pull them in while they're working? How do you match the way you market with the way a human actually lives and works and shops and learns? And so our solution is much more around the cost to develop a piece of content. It used to be very expensive to create a TV show, or very expensive to create a radio show or a newspaper or anything. Boy, the cost to create content is really dropped a lot, 10, 100x. And so what we say is don't rent a piece of content on somebody else's traffic. Build your own piece of content. Build your own traffic and rent space to yourself, essentially. So the cost to develop content's dropped. Take advantage of that cost and build your own traffic in a new way. And if you create good content, people tend to find good content. It's like a magnet. So if you've got a good blog, or you've got a good show on YouTube, or if you've got a good ebook, or you've got a good piece of any type of content, it turns into a magnet. People end up finding it. The internet's very efficient at funneling people towards great content.
So what are some of the downsides? Because when I think about this, building an audience, and we did this with the show, we focused on great content, but it takes time, doesn't it? To build that audience?
That's the rub on it. Traditional marketing is about the width of your wallet. This new marketing is about the width of your brain. You don't need a lot of money to create content today to start a show like you've started, or to start a blog, or start anything today. The cost has dropped dramatically. but you need to be clever and smart, and it takes a little bit of time. And so for your show, you have to take time, and you have to get on reasonable guests, and you have to ask good questions, and you have to keep it compelling, and you have to become a good editor. None of which costs a lot of money, but it costs your time and energy.
Yeah.
That's the hard part, is it takes a little bit of time, but boy, it pays off in spades.
So I'm always asking myself this question, and I'm curious, like, how long do you give a good idea or something that you know is a solid strategy before you give up on it? Because I tend to think that there's a lot of people out there trying to do inbound marketing. You know, blogs are not new.
No.
Social media, is now in the mainstream.
No.
And yet we're still trying to figure this stuff out. So, it almost feels like last man standing kind of contest. If you can consistently create great content, and then, a function of that is it gets shared and gets talked about, of course, and you get attention and you get written up in magazines and whatever, that have happened to us. But, what about all the other great ideas that didn't have the staying power? How long do you give it?
You mean if you're starting to do inbound marketing, how long do you give it?
Yeah. So at HubSpot, you guys work with a lot of new small businesses, right?
We do.
I mean, it's not enterprise stuff, it's small business.
Yep. So,
what's your advice to those people?
The thing with inbound marketing and content creation, it's not overnight. It never happens overnight. It takes 3, 4, 5 months before you start to really see it click. Mm-hmm. The nice thing there's a couple interesting things about inbound marketing and about content creation. The first interesting thing is the math on content creation is the exact opposite math as to traditional outbound advertising, whatever type of marketing you want to call it. Where I create a piece of content today, let's just say it's a blog to make it simple, write a great blog article, and then I write another one a week from now, and another one a week from now, and another one a week from now, so I've got 4 pieces of content. Those pieces of content are permanent assets sort of on your marketing balance sheet. They never go away. People link to them, those links are permanent links, they send you traffic, it can rank in Google forever, it can get spun up in Twitter, Facebook, whatnot forever, they're permanent. Whereas traditional marketing is like you're renting space. It's a renting versus owning. It's an asset versus a rental.
Yeah.
Sort of the first thing I like. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So that you said 4 to 5 months?
3 or 4 months starts to click.
So I'll repeat that. So you said 3 to 4 months. Is that sort of consistent with the amount of time it takes to sort of propagate the internet and get the bots to crawl your site and to sort of bubble up? Is that kind of the time frame you've given?
It's just more, we have 10,000 customers and we look at the math of people who create an article or 2 a week, let's say.
Yeah.
And when they can start to really see the leads start flowing in and the customers flowing in. When people give up after a month, it's a real shame because it takes a few months.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing I think is really interesting about this type of marketing is it's a little bit like venture capitalists. When a venture capitalist will invest, they'll make, let's say they'll make 100 bets across 100 companies. 5 will be home runs, 4 will be doubles, let's say 6 will be singles, and the rest will be strikeouts. So there's 85 strikeouts.
By the way, you're a Boston guy. I should say congratulations first.
Thank you. About the Red
Way
Sox,
to go.
thank you.
We're all behind you. We're all rooting for you.
Cool. And it's a little bit like that with inbound marketing and with content creation is you might create 100 posts and the average post might get 1,000 visitors to it. But once in a while you write a post, you'll get 100,000 or 1 million visitors to that post.
Yeah, it takes off, goes viral.
And so it's a little bit, it's a timing game. And if you do it for 3 or 4 months versus 3 or 4 weeks, you're more likely to hit one of those articles that will really tip.
So we talked a little bit about the duration. Let's talk about the frequency. Sure. So what kind of frequency do you recommend to sort of get the traction that we're all looking for?
Okay, the thing I say to our customers is at a minimum, 3 or 4 hours a week that you're doing some sort of content creation, social media work, email marketing, some sort of marketing work, and you can really get your mojo going. So that's the floor. On the top side, what we've noticed is there is a bit of an upper end on how much content you can create. And so, for example, at HubSpot, we found on any given single blog, if you write more than 2 posts a day, the amount of unsubscribes tends to go up. So
there's this law of diminishing returns.
There is, on a given blog. So my suggestion is if you've got so much mojo that you're hitting 2 a day, is start a new blog. So there's sort of a lower boundary and upper boundary. I don't have exact science on this, but it's about 3 or 4 hours a week on the low end.
Yeah.
And maybe that's 2 pieces of content a week. Maybe it's 2 blog articles a week and an ebook once a month.
Okay, so I'm fascinated by this. You sort of to carry it in the VC terms. We're diversifying our portfolio here, right?
Yes.
That's kind of your strategy, right?
Yeah.
So you want to have several touch points. So whether it's, well, let me ask you this. So, blogs obviously still very viable, great way to go. You're building assets. You're not renting space. Where else should I be? Where else should I pay attention to?
If I'm starting new, blogs are easy, so I like that one. Creating video content is a very good way to go.
Yeah. Not easy, by the way. Takes real talent.
We found that just ebooks work incredibly well.
Okay.
If you write a thoughtful ebook and you combine it with let's say you're writing 2 blog articles a week and you link them to your ebook, it's like this machine that just starts to crank where somebody reads the blog article, they click on a call to action, links to a landing page that describes the ebook, fill out the form, you get the ebook, you nurture that person via email. That's the fundamental inbound marketing machine. It works incredibly well.
How many pages in a good ebook?
10.
10 pages.
Yeah.
So.
Some nice pictures.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about social media. Let's break that down a little bit. So, social media is not new.
Nope.
Still a lot of people trying to figure it out. Still a lot of people screwing it up and using it incorrectly, right?
Yep.
Many people will say. Let's talk about individual platforms and how we can use the platforms to help accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure.
Maybe even let's back up one step and ask, what's the point of all this inbound marketing? Like, for your customers, is it all about lead gen? Is it about converting sales? What else is it good for?
Here's the way here's an analogy. I like analogies. Let me give you my analogy.
I like analogies too.
Okay, good. The marketers I deal with, they're like lions, right? And they're hunting elephants. And for generations, they've been hunting those elephants. They've been hunting them in the forest. And the elephant's been in the forest and the eating's been good. The problem for everybody, though, is the elephants are no longer in the forest. They've abandoned the forest. They're out on the savannah. And on the savannah, there's watering holes. There's a giant watering hole, lots of elephants around it, called Google. And there's another one called Twitter, and another one called Facebook, another one called LinkedIn. There's a bunch of other smaller ones, and there's new ones popping up. Some are going away. And marketers just need to flip the way they think, get the heck out of the forest and get on the savannah and hunt where the elephants are. And the elephants, they live in Google. So you need to figure out a way to get found in Google without completely draining your wallet. We should talk about PPC, but without completely draining your wallet, you need to get to that one. You need to get to the Twitter watering hole, the Facebook watering hole, and the LinkedIn watering hole. So the point is, how do you get found in those watering holes, in those social media sites? That's where people live. Mm-hmm. You got to market where people live. You need to pull people in where they live.
Yeah, so how do you do that? So with great content, you're saying?
Yes, and it's this interplay of content and social media. Social media is like the fuel on the fire. Let's say you write a brilliant blog article, or you've read a brilliant ebook, and you can all your blog subscribers will see that, and you can email out to your whole email list. But the fuel on the fire is if that content truly is brilliant, people want to retweet it and send it to their friends. They want to like it on Facebook. They want to spread it because they feel smart if they spread it. And so we talked earlier about how the internet is very efficient at helping people find really good pieces of content. The social media sites, Google was the first place where it became really efficient, YouTube, but Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, they make it very efficient to be able to find brilliant content. So it's the interplay of the two. One thing we've noticed about our users is when people spend a lot of time creating great content versus people spend a lot of time just using social media, like they don't create content, but they just use social. Just social alone doesn't seem to work. It's that interplay between the two that's sort of a 1 + 1 = 3.
And why do you think that is? Because there's sort of the list building aspect tied to it?
I just think it's like fuel on the fire. It's how do you really spread it and make it go viral versus, it just increases that slope of the curve for you. Like I think about a great piece of, let's just say you're starting from zero today.
Yeah.
You've got no Twitter, let's just take Twitter for example. You got no blog subscribers. You write your first article and it's pretty good and you build up, you get 10 Twitter followers. And then you write another article the next day, you get 20 Twitter followers. there's an economies of scale to it. So let's say you've got 20,000 followers on Twitter and you write a brilliant article. It goes from 20,000 to 20,100. Like it jumps in bigger. It gives you leverage and gives you scale.
Yeah.
It's also part of why it's not a 3 or 4 week game. It's a 3 or 4 month or 3 or 4 year game because there's leverage in there. All your lists are getting bigger. All your loops are reinforcing at that point.
So what's your take on organic versus PPC? Let's talk about that. How do you feel about it? Something you recommend?
The PPC game is really interesting. Really interesting, actually. And I have some controversial views on it. PPC worked unbelievably well for almost every industry on the planet 5 years ago. By its definition, they set it up as an auction for each keyword. And when there's not many people bidding on the auction, the prices are relatively low. But the whole world sort of entered the PPC game, so each auction is 10 times more competitive than it was before.
Yeah.
And so it
drives up the cost.
Yeah, just every word is a lot more expensive. It's just harder and harder to get the math to work and find that arbitrage opportunity because the world's just gotten very sophisticated around it. And so the thing that happens is your cost per lead through PPC, it just shoots up almost exponentially very, very quickly. So the amount of money that someone can spend on PPC in an economical way that keeps their cost to acquire a customer at a reasonable level seems to be dropping over time. It's just become a less efficient way to generate leads than it ever has been. And so for us, we see it as one little piece of your strategy. It used to be something you could build your whole business on the back of PPC. It's just awfully hard to do that today. So I think it's working less and less well, unfortunately, over time than it used to.
So you're a business advisor. I've got a marketing budget. Mm-hmm. What should my marketing mix look like, and how should I spend it?
Okay, I've got a very counterintuitive view on this.
Okay.
Most companies, when they look at their marketing budget, 90% of it is on campaigns, PPC, television, radio, you name it. 10% is on their people. Mine's flipped. I want 90% on the people, creating assets, maybe 10% on campaigns, where you can get that math to work. When I say people and assets, it's sort of back to what we were talking about before. Each piece of content you create is this modern marketing asset that pulls customers in through Google and from social media and from blogs and from other sites. And so I want to build that I want to build those assets up over time.
Yeah.
It's people who create those assets. I don't want to rent stuff, I want to own stuff. So that's what I advise people. It's the exact opposite way marketing's been done forever. But I think the proper marketing department actually has a lot of people and very little advertising budget.
So do you think even, using the existing infrastructure, companies could kind of flip the script and say, okay, instead of paying the ad agency, and giving them budgets, it's like, okay, we're going to utilize the talent that we've got right here, the smart thinkers, the people who want to create stuff, and empower you to create content. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Empower your existing employees to create content, or as you're thinking about bringing in a new marketer, you might avoid the career marketer who's built their career on buying email lists and cold calling and buying ads, and think about hiring a journalist or hiring somebody who can write or create ebooks or create videos, something like that. Oftentimes they're earlier in their career, and there's sort of an arbitrage opportunity there from a salary perspective as well.
Yeah, good tips. Let's talk about more advice you'd give small business owners. So a lot of the small business owners, they have a tough time. They're stuck behind the cash register, they get in the weeds of the day-to-day. What are some of those marketing things that you would advise them to do first? And let's talk about priority too.
Sure. Let me ask you, and let me give you an interesting question, Bryan.
Okay.
Bryan Solis, I love the Bryans today. He wrote a great article a couple of weeks ago, and I don't have the numbers exactly right. We got pretty close. My question is, in 1983, there were 1,000 largest companies in the United States. By 1993, how many of those 1,000 were left?
I think I saw this. So it was almost staggering, like
Staggering.
None of them.
It was the opposite. So there was almost all of them.
Oh, okay.
Then from 2003 to 2013, almost none.
Okay, gotcha.
Which I think is absolutely fascinating. So in 1983, once you're a big company, you stayed a big company.
Yeah.
Extremely hard to disrupt and enter into becoming a big company. whereas the exact opposite thing is going on in society today. And it's the internet. It's completely disrupting every industry, from music to television to marketing to sales, you name it. Everything's got to be rethought sort of from scratch. And so I guess my comment on small business owners is I just love it. It's a terrific time to start a business. It's a brutally tough time to be a huge company. I think more and more people should start businesses and be aggressive today. It's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, any kind of entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. Of course, I'm highly biased, but
Yes.
playing the other side of the coin, with all the content out there, you're advocating that I create more content. That, if I've got an ocean of content, you want me to take my little bottles of water and pour it in.
Yeah.
So it seems counterintuitive. It seems like it's impossible. Like, if I didn't get in first, I'm going to have a very hard time getting my voice heard. Sure. What do you say to people who say that?
It depends on the industry. For example, if you're in my industry, I'm the internet marketing industry, it certainly is competitive, and you have to be pretty good. It's the top of the first inning in almost every other industry, whether you're selling guitars or you're a left-handed monkey wrench maker or you're a plumber or furniture maker. You just need to be better than the other schmucks out there, because almost no one is really doing this. We have a neat tool at HubSpot that's free. It's called marketinggrader.com. We get 4,000 people a day run their websites through it. And when I look at a website, I don't just look at the website, I look at how many links are coming into it, how many retweets is the site getting, comments on their blog. I look at all this other stuff. Very, very few people on the face of this earth are doing inbound marketing, content marketing, internet marketing right. It's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Very early in the game in almost every industry. I would say start today, don't wait a year from now. The other thing that happens in the industry that's quite interesting, it turns out it's hard to climb over people. So let's say, Bryan, you wanted to start a blog to compete with HubSpot's blog. It's actually hard. I mean, we have a giant Twitter following, giant Facebook following, giant blog subscriber following.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to climb over the guys in front of you. So this is not a game you want to be last to. But in almost every industry, it's the top of the first inning. It's not even the second inning.
So what do you do if a company has negative reviews? I know there's, whether it's Twitter or Yelp or, got someone on your tail that's not happy, it tends to bubble up high on the internet. And say I've got a business and that's bothering me or affecting my business, what do I do?
The nice thing about the internet is it certainly has made the world a lot more efficient. Almost every industry has become more efficient. It used to be you could treat your customers like crap and it didn't matter. You could grow a business based on crappy service. And
Well, there's still old-fashioned word of mouth. People would tell each other in small towns.
But man, it's so much more efficient to give a bad review or a good review these days. So I just think business in general, you just can't get away with bad service anymore or bad product. You have to be better. And I think that's good for society at large.
Yeah, it raises the bar.
Yeah, it's great. As a consumer, I love it. Whenever I travel, I go to Yelp and I go to all these sites and I pick the best place. Whereas before, you're sort of guessing or going on one person's opinion who wrote a book. The world is a much better place.
Yeah.
So I think it's overall good. What I would say about, let's say you have a bad review in Yelp, is you should respond. You can respond in there. TripAdvisor, you can respond as well. And then try to address the concern as best you can. Try not to be defensive and try to make your service better. It's a small world and you've got to deal with that today. I think it's a good thing. It keeps you on your toes. I'll give you an example of how that impacts us. There's a new site called G2 Crowd that's fantastic. Have you checked out G2 Crowd?
No.
It's sort of like Gartner and Forrester and companies like that who analyze big pieces of technology. And usually, let's say inside of Gartner, there's one person inside of Gartner that will analyze marketing software.
Yep.
And that person's got a lot of power and has certain opinions. And their opinions, I suspect, are swayed by whether or not your company is a customer of theirs. And it's completely inefficient. It's completely at the whim of that individual person. There's a new site called G2 Crowd that lets all the customers in the world vote on who's got the good stuff and creates their own sort of Yelp for business for business products. Another fantastic site called Glassdoor. It's one of my favorite sites that employees can rate your CEO, which is really cool, and can rate your company. Everybody's got to get on their toes. Every industry is going to have a Glassdoor and a G2 Crowd, and the whole world's got to step up its game, or it's going to be rough for you. I think it's a good trend.
So let's talk about the CEO's role in social media. Are you Are you vocal? Are you consistent? Are you out there? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think CEOs need to get on social media in a big way. It used to be that that I sort of think the CEO communicated with the marketplace through, one line in a quote in a press release. That's sort of what the world heard from the CEO, and maybe the letter in the annual report. And I just think society's desire to hear from that CEO and desire for transparency has radically changed in the last couple of years, and the millennials are sort of insisting on this. And I think at a very minimum, a CEO should have an updated LinkedIn profile, make it easy to connect and have reviews on there. Should be on Twitter, if for no other reason, even if they don't want to tweet, to send a message to prospective customers that, hey, I'm open for business. If you want to tweet something at me, a complaint or something good, I'll hear it and I can get it done. It sends an incredibly positive message to somebody who's thinking about buying a product from your company that your CEO is available and easily accessible. At a maximum, they should be all over it, and they should write blog articles once in a while. They should tweet once in a while. They should post on Facebook. They should become their company's best marketer. Like Richard Branson is like one of the world's best marketers, massive Twitter following, very active on the blog. He uses the internet to market his product in an incredibly effective way. I think CEOs who aren't on Twitter, who aren't on Facebook, who aren't on LinkedIn are sending a closed sort of 1990s message to their marketplace and are missing a massive opportunity to market the product that they're trying to sell.
So give us an idea of the kind of content that you are creating via Twitter, for example.
Sure.
What are some of the things you tweet about?
Okay, so on Sundays I read a lot. It's my reading day, and I read online. I read most of the, I'm a little old school, I read most of the New York Times. My father used to say, if you read the New York Times cover to cover every Sunday, it's like getting a college education every Sunday, and for some reason that stuck in my head. So I still read the New York Times every Sunday, but I read it online. I use Flipboard, I use different stuff to read it, and I tweet anything interesting out of there. I read lots of other stuff, and I'm constantly tweeting out articles that I find are interesting. Yesterday I was working on some sales stuff with my sales operations teams. We're planning a new compensation plan for our sales reps next year. Our current compensation plan is way too complicated. I can't quite figure it out. Our sales reps can't figure it out. And for me, complexity is a cost. And so I tweeted a bunch of stuff about complexity. Turns out that was very popular. Lots of people retweeting my thoughts on complexity and my thoughts on the CEO's role on dampening complexity inside their company. So I'll write about what I'm working on and what I'm reading, essentially.
Great.
Yeah.
I think that's an important, we should underscore that because it's a focus on value. It's a focus on authenticity. You're not pushing out messages, and you're certainly not, trolling the water for compliments or whatever else people are doing.
I quote tweets. Like for some reason I got on a kick yesterday where I was looking at I'm in Southern California now, so I was thinking about John Wooden, and I tweeted 3 John Wooden quotes, and people, you can't lose with a John Wooden quote.
That's true.
Yeah.
Who else is doing it well, CEO-wise?
Yeah, the guy who's got it nailed is Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box. He's maybe the person I enjoy the most on Twitter. He's always got something funny and snarky to say. He doesn't promote Box. He's very transparent. He gives his brand, and you think what Box does, it's just like Dropbox, but it's enterprise. It's kind of boring.
It's a boring business, yeah.
He brings it this life that's great. And he's a very young guy. I don't know how old he is. I've never met him. He's late 20s. But he's injected that thing with a sex appeal that it doesn't deserve, let's say, through Twitter. He's fantastic on it.
Very good.
Yeah.
So as the CEO of a company, what are some of the things that are keeping you up at night? We talked about, taking complex things and making them simple. What are some of the things that you're focused on?
We're getting ready to go public. And so we're hiring lots of auditors and accountants and people like that. And I'm worried about what it'll do to our culture. We have a very transparent, interesting culture, and I'm worried that's going to dampen it. And so there's 2 sides of that. One, getting the machine ready to be public, getting it so it's much more predictable, because you can't miss your number once you're public, but also making sure that we don't ruin our culture as we move from privately owned to publicly owned is one thing I'm working on.
Oh, so what are you doing to work on it? I mean, that's That seems very difficult.
I'll give you my favorite question I asked. We just hired a CFO. My favorite question I would ask our candidates was, and CFOs are very buttoned up types. They're very conservative. They're paid to be conservative. And so they would come in for the interview. And what happens inside of a public company is you name 4 or 5 officers that can see everything but can only trade the stock in certain windows of time. They don't want everyone to see the information and be able to trade on it and play games with it. And so my test for the CFO candidate would say, why can't I make everyone in the company, we have 600 and some odd people, an officer? And then all 600 people can only trade in certain windows. And I just look at their face. And if their face scrunches up like that's the craziest, I hate that idea, they're a bad fit. But if they're like, that's an interesting idea, let me think about that, that's a good fit. So that's one way I've been sort of working at that.
So essentially what you're saying is someone who's not power hungry, who understands that.
Who's open-minded.
Yeah.
And I sort of hate conventional wisdom. I feel like humans have completely changed the way they work and live. And we built a software platform to enable marketers to deal with that. We're trying to build a culture to enable our company to attract and lead these new type of humans. It's really amazing how much we've changed the way we work and live in the last couple of years. I feel like most companies are sort of trapped in the 90s, stuck in time. So we're trying to build that sort of modern culture and trying to not break that as we go public.
So what do you think of like Marissa Meyer's move to say, no more working remotely, everyone's got to be, butts in seats? And
yeah, I thought it was a terrible move. I think she's done great stuff, but I thought that was a really terrible move. I'll tell you a story. We had this great employee, Patrick, and there was one weekend that Patrick and I, we worked back and forth all weekend on a project, and he spent the whole weekend online. He was working the whole weekend. We both worked the whole weekend. Then I saw him a couple days later, and he handed me a form, and his form was his time off form because he wanted to take the following Friday off. I'm signing his form, and I just thought to myself, well, isn't that funny? I'm signing his form for a day off next Friday. Shouldn't he give me a credit form for all the work he did over the weekend? And it was that moment I was like, people, whether I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's bad probably, but no one actually has vacation anymore. Everyone's got their iPhone or their iPad or whatever device they use with them all the time. Yeah. And the boundaries have really blurred. And I'm not saying this is a good thing for society, but it's the reality. And there is no such thing as vacation anymore in the way that my dad used to think about it, let's say. So we've eliminated the vacation form. We've eliminated the vacation policy. Take vacation wherever the heck you want to take vacation. You want to take a week off, you want to take a month off. You don't have to tell us when you're taking it, just take it off. So we're trying to rethink a lot of things to match the way modern humans live. It's the same thing about commuting. The average Bostonian spends $1,500 a year commuting and spends an hour and a half. It's $1,500 and it's $1,400 in an hour and a half commuting every day. That hour and a half, you add all that time up, that's a lot of productive time wasted in your car, on the train, or however you get to work. Yeah. And the $1,500 can be used somewhere else. And you're wailing on the environment with your car or whatever you're using for transportation. We just prefer people keep the $1,400 a year and keep the hour and a half a day and work at home with their dog or their cat or their pet alligator or parrot, whatever they've got at home. They're less distracted there. I think Marissa will change her mind on that down the road. I just don't think it makes any sense. It used to be in my dad's era that you had to go to work to get work done. I have to go home to get work done now. It's far less distracting. It used to be the office was a place. Now the office is a state of mind. I think things have completely changed. I think folks need to lean into that.
Let's get a little bit personal, Bryan.
Okay.
So, CEO of the company, guys, you're getting ready to go public.
Yep.
You talked about being concerned about company culture, or at least maintaining that kind of culture. And but what are you afraid of? Let's talk about fear a little bit.
Okay. I'll be very transparent. I'm afraid of, we're swimming in waters with big sharks with big teeth. Salesforce.com swims in the same waters we swim in. Yeah. LinkedIn basically swims in similar waters. Google swims in similar waters.
So you got Mark, you got Reed, you got Sergey.
Yeah, and so we've got to step up our game. It's gone really well. It's gone far better than I thought, frankly, when we started the company. We're growing fast. It's getting big. It's cranking. But we want to sort of build something that outlasts ourselves. We want to build a very special company our employees will be proud of. Our customers are getting tons of value. And we've got a lot of work to do. We're in the second inning of a long ball game, and we're swimming in some waters with some big sharks with big teeth. So,
well, I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn, because
which thing?
I'm glad you mentioned LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because I think LinkedIn in several ways is undervalued, and perhaps underutilized. And I don't think it's really come of age yet. You know, it's sort of the dark horse social network. You know, exclusively business and all that stuff. But I think you're gonna be all right, Bryan, because, you know, for me, I'm still really trying to find the value in LinkedIn, to be honest with you. And you know, for example, compared to like a HubSpot, where it's teaching me about content as a strategy. It's not necessarily new, but it's a revolutionary idea.
Sure.
And it can scale.
Yep.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about LinkedIn is their business models very different from Twitter or Facebook or all the previous social networks. It's a social network, but they make a little bit of money by selling ads on there, but most of their money, they build software applications that add value to, that are built on top of that platform and that social network. They're a software as a service company built on top of a social network. It's quite clever what they've done, and I kind of agree with you that there's a lot more value there than they've exposed or will expose. Their market, I think Wall Street's figured that out because their market cap's actually very rich. But that's a very well-run company. Some adults are running that thing, and there's a lot of upside there. I think it's a good company. We're partners with them now, but you know, I'm curious to see where they go down the road. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be very interesting what they build down the road and what they do.
Yeah. Okay, we've been spending a little time with CEO of HubSpot, Bryan Halligan. Bryan, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Best of luck in everything you're doing.
Awesome.